know what time it is. It's Monday, around noon Eastern time, and every Monday we go live, recapping every single game as it relates to fantasy football. Unfortunately, we are back again, and we're going to be back every single week, probably through week 18, because I hate myself, and giving myself pain is what continues to make me go forward and thrive. I thrive on adversity. I hate it, but I thrive on it, all right? If you don't want to face adversity, is what you're going to do. You're going to go over to Underdog Fantasy, because right now they literally have a free square for you. If Patrick Mahomes goes over 0.5 total yards tonight, they play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. They also have free squares pretty much every single day, no matter when you sign up, whether it's tonight, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's Thursday, whether it's next fucking Thursday, they're going to give you a free square for using our code, all right? If you get onto Underdog Fantasy, download the Underdog Fantasy app, use code BDGE when you deposit $10 or more, they are going to hit you with a free square and a deposit bonus for whatever you end up putting down on there. Plus, you will get a membership access to the Big Dog membership, right, for the remainder of the season. I'm done talking shit. I'm done yapping. Ben, how you doing? 2 concussions in 3 weeks. I feel like I have 2 concussions in 3 weeks, to be honest with you, the way that my fucking fantasy team is playing. But let's start with someone who is on my fantasy team, and that is Mr. Aaron Rodgers, who looked a lot better in Thursday Night Football. And this one throws for 3 touchdowns after a brutal first half. This was something that I'm pretty keen on. I think the Jets' offense is going to be fine. I think they've looked a little off here and there, but as they click with Adams and Garrett Wilson, I still think that this team has a chance to make some noise down the stretch, okay? So I think better days are ahead for the Jets. This was a good day. This was not a good day for Houston. We see Breece Hall had another relatively disappointing day. They can't really get him going, but I believe they play the Cardinals next week, so they should probably have a big day for him. He should get into the end zone. He is taking pretty much all of the work again from Braylon Allen. Devontae, 7 for 91 and a touchdown. Garrett Wilson, just one of the craziest catches of all time, 9 for 90 and 2 touchdowns. There needs to be multiple companies that just try to make that their logo for the foreseeable future, okay? On the flip side, things are not good in Houston right now. Their pass blocking is atrocious. As you can see, C.J. Stroud took 8 sacks in this one, 191 yards, a scoreless day for C.J. Stroud. Joe Mixon gets it done again as a high-end RB1. Tank Dell does get home, 6 for 126, but that's about the only positive bright spot for this offense. Supposedly, Nico Collins is going to be back in Week 10. We'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. It was a significant hamstring strain that he ended up with. So they have been eyeing a return for him. The practice reports this upcoming Wednesday will be very telling. Obviously, if he is a DNP right off the rip, I would have a hard time believing that that man is going to be on the field and playing, but they need him badly. They need him really, really, really badly. The other thing to note is that the trade deadline is tomorrow. And I believe there are a lot of wide receivers that could potentially be moved. I mean, we talk about Adam Thielen, talk about Jacoby Myers. We talk about guys like that I feel like would be a really good fit for this Houston offense, that, you know, they would occupy the Diggs role. Nico Collins comes back. You have a veteran that occupies the slot role, which I think both Jacoby and Adam Thielen are both capable of doing regardless. So those are the types of dudes that you probably want to hold on to right now in case they end up getting moved to a Washington or a Houston, who I think badly needs the help there. So nothing new here that you need to know about. You're starting Joe Mixon. You could start Tank Dell if Nico's out. I think he's more of like a flexish play maybe if Nico's back, but just keep an eye on practice reports for that one. My Falcons put the fucking whooping on the Dallas Cowboys. They ended up making the game close, but it wasn't close throughout. Kirk Cousins, people don't want to have the conversation. People don't want to have the conversation, but right now, Kirk's got to be top 5 in the MVP conversation. You know, nobody's catching Lamar Jackson, both physically and in this race for the MVP. But Kirk's been fucking lights out, all right? Everyone wanted to shit on him in week 1. Not I. Kirk Cousins, 222, 3 more touchdowns. A lot of injuries in this game to go over, though. Bijan Robinson's been a fucking beast over the last 3 or 4 weeks. This is the Bijan Robinson that a lot of people drafted. He goes for about $140 total, 7 catches. So if you're playing in a PPR league, Bijan's been a 20-point per game guy over the last month of the season. Their schedule is nothing crazy over the next few weeks, and then their playoff schedule is like Vegas, Washington, the New York Giants. So Bijan can legitimately be a league winner down the stretch for you. Darnell Mooney continues to just fucking eat 5 for 88 and a touchdown. The man was the wide receiver 13 going into the week and then puts up another 20-point PPR performance. So he's got to be top 10 at least going into next week. Drake London hurt his hip on the touchdown catch. Now, Drake London's hip, apparently, from everything that I've gathered, from everything that I've taken in, is not supposed to be too serious. It's more of a pain tolerance thing. There is a possibility that he misses 1 week, but there's also just as good of a chance that he plays next week. So nothing too serious on the Drake London front if you are a London owner. On the flip side, we've got a couple serious things with Dak Prescott. Prescott probably fractured his hand. It's kind of what it sounds like, is what I've heard. The swelling in his hand doesn't look like that, apparently, unless there is some sort of fracture. He also has a hamstring strain. So he's dealing with a bunch of injuries. From what I've heard right now, there is super serious doubt about his status for this upcoming week in Week 10, which causes a problem for Dak Prescott owners, but also Rico Dowdle owners, Jake Ferguson owners, CeeDee Lamb owners. Now, CeeDee Lamb owners are also dealing with their own injury. He has an AC sprain, which can be serious, cannot be serious. He can likely play next week. He came back into the game this week, but was relatively ineffective, non-effective, ineffective, the least effective, the WOT, however you want to dice that shit up. English, not my strong suit, obviously. I always get blown away by people who can speak multiple languages. I'm like, man, I'm old as fuck. I spent my whole life trying to learn one language. I'm not even good at it. But yeah, there's a chance that CeeDee Lamb ends up missing a week or so. We'll see what the swelling ends up with. We'll see if the MRI comes back with anything more serious. But with Dak out, like, sure, you could say like Cooper Rush kind of led a good drive. It's fucking Cooper Rush. It's not Dak Prescott anymore. So the entire offense in Dallas becomes really, really low floor and not very high ceiling. Okay, so the Cowboys are kind of in disarray right now. Rico Dowdle, though, he is like one of their lone bright spots right now. 12 for 75 on the ground, catches a ridiculous touchdown, 5 catches, 32 yards, gets into the end zone. So if you played him, you kind of walked away with a really big game from him. And now that Zeke is like not really playing, if we look at the breakdown on snap counts for the Dallas Cowboys running back position, Rico Dowdle, season high 73% of the snaps. Hunter Lupke, 21%. Dalvin Cook only played on 8% of the snaps. So despite Zeke not playing, it didn't mean anything for the other guys. All it meant was workhorse duty for Rico Dowdle, and Rico Dowdle showed out. 60% of the rush attempts, 60% of the routes. These are all season highs, and he performed really well. So there's no reason for them to go back to any other running back, in my opinion, for the foreseeable future. So if Dak is not playing, they're probably going to have to rely on the backfield pretty heavily. So got yourself a really solid RB2 in Rico Dowdle right now. And this website right here that has snap shares, that has, inside the 5-yard line attempts, 2-minute and 4-minute drill attempts, long down and distance attempts. This is one of the most useful features in all of the fantasy space right now. And this is on fantasylife.com. So if you go over to fantasylife.com, they've got a membership available for you for a full year. So if you cop it now, you'll have it through basically all of next season as well. It is a 1-year membership. And because I love you, you can use the code BDGE when you check out for a 20% off the membership discount. All right. That's big work right there. That is big fucking work right there. It is, I believe, an $80 membership now with the code. So that will get you access to this for 1 year. So if you're talking about trying to figure out who you should be trading for the playoffs, who you should be looking at in terms of picking up on the waiver wire, you ain't going to find something that's a better resource than the Fantasy Life utilization, what the fuck's it called? Utilization report. Yes, that's what it is. I have problems today. I told you I'm not good with English. What else is going on here? All right. I mean, I guess if we look at some of the injury fallouts here, like if CeeDee Lamb ends up missing time, Tolbert is, what are we doing? Nah, don't give them attribution here on that fucking click. Jalen Tolbert's probably the next guy up. He had a down game, ended up scoring a touchdown, but he's probably the next leading wide receiver. I don't think Brandon Cooks is scheduled to be back anytime soon, but Tolbert would be flex worthy. Don't feel good about it, obviously, because Cooper Rush is the quarterback probably for next week. On the flip side, if Drake London misses time, Darnell Mooney probably becomes a must-start. Ray McLeod gets a little spicier. Kyle Pitts gets a little boost in the rankings, but I'm not really looking to get McLeod in my lineup unless I absolutely need to. Bills-Dolphins, this was a good game. Bills ended up kicking I believe it was like a walk-off field goal or like 5 seconds left, 61 yards to take it 30-27 against Miami. Josh Allen has just owned Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins. Allen, 235, 3 touchdowns. James Cook was okay. Ray Davis had the big play, 63-yard touchdown catch. Nothing else really too noticeable in this game. I will say there's a couple of injuries, like Amari Cooper randomly missed the game, so we have to pay attention to what his injury status is throughout the week. We hope that Keon Coleman can really step up, but he ended up hurting his wrist, I believe, and it's possible that it's kind of serious, actually, from what I've heard. So keep an eye on Keon Coleman. Keep an eye on Amari Cooper on the injury report. Probably means an uptick for Khalil Shakir. We saw Dalton Kincaid have 10 targets in this one, so an uptick for both of them. I'd imagine that they just continue to lean on their strong suit, which is their running game. So James Cook gets a big boost. Ray Davis should definitely be owned at this point in the year. Right now is when you want to start owning all the high-end handcuff running backs. On the flip side, basically the way that the Bills played this game is they sat in cover 2. They sat 2 safeties back, and they're like, we're going to allow you to get everything you want over the short area of the field, and that's exactly what Tua did. So he went 25 for 28 because they just allowed him to complete everything over the middle of the field. They're like, we're not going to let you beat us deep in any way, shape, or form. Ended up being a very good game plan because they could not hit Tyreek deep for anything. Jalen Waddle was the absolute fucking woat in this one. And as we've been talking about for a couple of weeks, like it's very clear that Devon Achane is the weapon number 2, if not the weapon number 1 at this point. But it's Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane, and then Waddle is like almost an afterthought at this point, where it's like, sure, he can come away with a lucky game or two, but right now it is super hard to start him in anything that's not a cupcake matchup. Devon Achane, likely a high-end RB1 for the remainder of the season. The dude, 2 more touchdowns, another 120 total yards, 8 catches. That's like 30 PPR fantasy points at least. Raheem Mostert did get 10 carries and 2 catches, but he fumbled the ball and then kind of ceded way to Jalen Wright for the remainder of the game. It feels kind of weird when like you bench a veteran for fumbling a ball. Like they're not going to change anything. It's not like they're new to the league and they don't know how to hang on to the ball. He's fucking Raheem Mostert. He's like 40 years old, all right? So Raheem Mostert should be owned. I think Jalen Wright should probably be owned as well, just because, I mean, you kind of got to talking yourself into him being a factor down the playoffs, but like he's the type of dude who could have a huge last 4 weeks of the season and break out for you. Other than that, Odell ended up having more targets than Jalen Waddle. He fumbled the ball. He's kind of the woe as well, but nothing that you don't know about the Dolphins already. Bengals and the Raiders. The Bengals kicked the shit out of the Raiders, 41-24. Gardner Minshew got benched in this one in favor of Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder somehow threw for 74 yards on 16 attempts. He's so bad. I can't imagine they let him trot out again, but it is what it is. Alexander Mattison, 9 for 36 on the ground. Didn't catch any passes. Gardner Minshew, Zamir White did get more involved in this one, 6 for 10 on the ground. This guy might actually be averaging 2.1 yards per carry on. He might have the worst yards per carry in a single season of all time. Someone's going to have to fact check me on that. What's his face? Antonio Pierce came out and was like, I want to get Zamir White more involved. I guess this is what he meant by that. He had, I believe, 2 goal line carries. One got called back for a penalty, and then he got another shot at it, so he ended up getting in for the end zone. It's a little bit worrisome for Madison owners. I think the Raiders are on a bye next week, but I think the more worrisome part for this game in particular was they got down against Cincinnati, and where we saw Madison running a lot of the routes, right? Like you see like 60%, 40%, 40%. He was down at 28%, and Amir Abdullah ended up running 56% of the routes, which was a season high for him. And that's a little bit concerning because Madison, like, he's been getting the volume enough to be a decent fantasy player for you because he's catching like 3, 4, 5 passes a game. Doesn't amount to much, but like those end up getting you an extra like 7 or 8 PPR points a game. And if he's not getting that, that becomes a really, really tough start, especially, you know, Zamir White on the goal line, Amir Abdullah in passing situations. Like, what does Alexander Mattison become? Outside of that, you know, you're starting Jacoby, you're starting Brock Bowers. Jacoby, again, is a name to keep an eye on for the trade deadline tomorrow. On the flip side, Burrow, 5 touchdowns. Of course, T. Higgins, the absolute fucking coniest of cones, continues to sit out. They play on Thursday night, so I have very little confidence that we're going to see T. Higgins again in this matchup against Baltimore, which was a matchup that he scored like 2 touchdowns and had 80, 90 yards last time they played. So, like, just the woe T. Higgins really is. But Burrow, huge game, and that was because Mike Gesicki had a huge game, and we've seen this theme now. Every time T. Higgins sits, Mike Gesicki ends up being like the slot wide receiver. And it's interesting how their offense kind of functions. It's like when T. Higgins is playing, you could move Jamar Chase around a lot more. When he's not playing, you kind of need Jamar Chase to play outside the entire time, and then Gesicki becomes the slot wide receiver, and that's why he has these big games. So if T. Higgins remains out, I think Gesicki is a top 10 tight end option. I'm not like super banking on it, just because we've seen him disappoint us so many times. But Eric All Jr., their promising rookie, also tore his ACL in this one. This is the same ACL that he tore a year ago. So RIP to that young man, unfortunately, but it probably means more routes, more receptions, more targets, and more catches for Mr. Mike Gesicki there. I mean, the biggest takeaway here, though, is Chase fucking Brown. Zach Moss randomly ruled out with some sort of neck injury on Sunday. And that opened up the backfield to be completely Chase Brown. The man had 27 carries. There wasn't a single running back carry to another running back. 27 for 120 on the ground. Also caught 5 balls for 37 yards and a touchdown. This was wildly easy to see coming, just because those two together have combined for a ton of fantasy points in that backfield, and the matchup was incredible. And now you condense it down to one player, 32 touches, 160 yards from scrimmage, and a touchdown. There's a good chance. I don't know what Zach Moss's status is going forward. If he misses significant time, if he misses any time, Chase Brown is a loaded top 10, top 5 fantasy running back, because this offense is averaging like 33 points per game, I want to say, over the last 5 or 6 games. And it's a running back group that just gets points and they just get shit done. So Chase Brown looks to me like a possible league winner right now. Chargers and Browns, Justin Herbert throwing the ball as good as any quarterback in the NFL right now. Another 282 and 2 touchdowns, 10.4 yards per attempt as the Chargers beat the shit out of the Browns. Now, this is like part of the Jameis experience. They played against a very tough defense. He got sacked 6 times. He threw 3 interceptions. Like, it got bad really, really early. J.K. Dobbins, 14 carries, 85 yards, 2 touchdowns. He gets it done for what feels like the first time in a while. I think he scored a touchdown last week or recently, but this was like finally like a real big time ceiling game out of him. I will say they were splitting carries on the first drive or two with Kamani Vidal, and I still think Kamani Vidal is worth holding on to if you are a J.K. Dobbins owner down the stretch, just because how functional this offense is right now. If Dobbins were to go down, Kamani would probably step into a huge role in a plus offense. The receivers, McConkey continues to get it done. We saw Palmer and Johnson back in this one. Ton of broken coverages here. Like Johnson 8 in this one, but a lot of it had to do with just broken coverage for the Browns defense. So I'm not going head over skis here to go grab these wide receivers. I think Johnson should be owned. I think Palmer maybe. Johnson's shown a lot more explosion. He's shown a lot more consistency actually when healthy than Palmer has this year. So I think he is definitely ownable, and I pick him up if he's on the waiver wire. But again, this doesn't feel repeatable based on how broken the coverage was for Cleveland in this one. If you started Cedric Tillman, you got pretty lucky. You walked away with that touchdown at the very, 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 very end of the game in garbage time. Jerry Jeudy gets it done, 7 for 73. Of course, Elijah Moore does not get it done because I started him. That was the one guy that we needed to do something here, and he did not. Backfield, though, I didn't even know Jerome Ford was healthy, to be honest. I didn't even realize he was playing. But Nick Chubb continues to be really inefficient. Another 2.6 yards per carry game, 15 carries, 39 yards. They're using him a lot. The usage is really good, but in games against the Chargers, like, this is such a tough defense to really get anything going. They are number 1 in the NFL, I think, against fantasy quarterbacks, against fantasy wide receivers, and they're top 3 against fantasy running backs. So this was a brutal, brutal matchup for Nick Chubb, for the running backs in Cleveland. Pierre Strong got a couple carries. Jerome Ford got a couple carries. And I think when you look at the usage actually for the Browns, like when they get down in game script, Jerome Ford, 45% of the snaps, despite missing the last couple of weeks. Like, you know, Nick Chubb, never going to be a pass-catching guy. But like last week, 42% of the routes. You're not going to see that type of game again. 16% dipped down to this one because Jerome Ford was up at 54%. We saw Pierre Strong taking, 15, 20% of the snaps plus 16% of the routes there. None of them are really doing much in that because Jameis Winston is much more of like a slinger. He'll throw it downfield into traffic rather than just taking the safe bet of throwing it down to his running backs. But again, I'm still like very, very concerned with Nick Chubb and his efficiency because if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's giving you like 4 or 5 fantasy points. And this was always the concern coming into the year, right? I was one of the biggest proponents of not drafting dudes like Nick Chubb and Jonathan Brooks because even if they did come back this year, which I was even skeptical of, to be honest with you, what were we going to see with them? So you were holding on to them for a very long time, and now we're just seeing week after week after week kind of float by where they're giving you probably negative games because you continue to roll them out. And now they play the Ravens, who have or they already played the Ravens, never mind. The Saints are actually a terrible run defense, so you might be able to start Nick Chubb against them, I guess, but I'm still hesitant. Then you get Pittsburgh, Denver, Pittsburgh, Kansas City. That is a really tough slate of games. So if you're trying to get off Nick Chubb, I don't think right now is that bad. Or maybe play against the Saints, and then after that might not be that bad of a time to do so. Titans, Patriots. Drake May is just so exciting if you're a New England Patriots fan. Honestly, like he's looked really good, really exciting player. 95 yards on the ground is insane for a quarterback. But he's still making a lot of bad plays back there. He's throwing multiple interceptions. He's taking a lot of sacks, but that's probably a lot more to do with the supporting cast around him. But exciting nonetheless. Ramondre Stevenson gets in twice in this one. So if you started him, you kind of got lucky there because you went 10 for 16 on the ground. Hunter Henry continues to be a set it and forget it tight end 1 as long as Drake May is the QB. You can't really trust any of these other pass catchers in this receiving group whatsoever. On the flip side, the story of the day was all Tony Pollard. This dude, DMP Wednesday, DMP Thursday, DMP Friday, don't give a fuck Sunday. That's what it was. It was DMP, 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 DGAF. 28 carries for 128 yards, 3 catches for 26 yards. Didn't get into the end zone, but like was very close to. Tony Pollard just continues to dominate this backfield. Tajay Spears close to returning. I don't know that it's going to matter because they clearly trust the shit out of Tony Pollard. Maybe Will Levis is back, but Mason Rudolph coming off a win. Maybe they just allow him to ride things out. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, I want to say he has 4 straight games with a touchdown. We talked about him in the waiver wire video last week, and we do a waiver wire video every Tuesday, obviously. So if you are new here and you want to subscribe for that video, that usually drops around noon Eastern time every Tuesday. We talked about Nick Westbrook-Ikhine because the man will not stop scoring touchdowns despite being in the woke fucking passing offense. Yep. Touchdown, 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 touchdown. 4 straight games with a touchdown. The yardage is awful, but you're starting to see the usage creep up each week. Two targets, 4 targets, 4 targets, 6 targets. The yardage is going up, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that if we look at the usage here, since DeAndre Hopkins got sent to another country, he got deported, we have Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, now a full-time player, right? 20% in week 6, 55% of the routes in week 7. Enter DeAndre Hopkins leaving, 95% of the routes in week 8, 97% this week. And you're seeing the targets start to follow along with that. So, again, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, not a great player by any stretch of the imagination, but the usage is there. I know there are people out there listening that are in 14, 16-team leagues, and they need some bright spots on their bench. And the Titans have an unbelievable passing schedule going forward after this quick stretch right here. They have the Chargers, the Vikings, and then they get the Texans, the Commanders, Jaguars, Bengals, Colts, Jaguars. Like those last 5 weeks and maybe even 6 weeks now that the Texans are getting shredded, like Jaguars twice, the Bengals, the Colts, it is absolutely just rolling downhill from there. So I think you could do worse. And Calvin Ridley owners, you are praying that Mason Rudolph stays under center. Moving on to the Commanders and the G-men, Jaden Daniels gets it done again. Brian Robinson, a random not a random, I guess. He didn't really practice much this week, but he got ruled out right before the game, which led to Chris Rodriguez jumping Jeremy McNichols in the pecking order here. He's still not really startable, even when Brian Robinson is out. Austin Eckler, definitely startable because he gets some goal line work and then also a bunch of pass-catching work here. So he is a nice RB2 as long as Brian Robinson is out. I think I expect him back. Terry gets it done, doesn't do much, but catches 2 touchdowns, so nothing really to take away from here. Zach Ertz continues to be extreme boomer bust tight end, just like every other tight end in this league for the most part. On the flip side, Daniel Jones, I guess he's doing what he can do behind this offensive line. They just wanted to run it and run it and run it and run it despite being down big in the first half. I believe Daniel Jones entered the second half with negative passing yards. I don't know if that's ever happened to a starting quarterback before, but it happened. Malik Neighbors ended up getting home just because the second half he saw like 10 targets. Tyrone Tracy continues to look so good, 16 for 66 on the ground, but could have been a much bigger day. I think in better game scripts or better matchups, like we will see better days from Tyrone Tracy. Devin Singletary, I would hold on to if I'm a Tracy owner, just because we know he's one of the few guys where, like for instance, if Brian Robinson goes down, Eckler's a good role, but there are multiple dudes involved. You have 4 guys in this offense getting multiple carries. If Tracy were to go down, we're likely to see Singletary have that same role that he had in the beginning of the year, where it was 90% of the opportunity share in that backfield. I don't think Eric Gray has touched the ball in like a month. So I wouldn't drop Devin Singletary. And again, in tomorrow's video, the waiver wire video, I'll go more in depth on guys to pick up, but also dudes that we should be holding on to and not dropping. I believe Darius Slayton might have suffered a concussion in this game, so that's something else to keep an eye on. Theo Johnson had a nice little breakout game here. He had a really nice catch and run that got him into the end zone, but it's nothing I'm like banking on for the remainder of the season. The Saints lost to the Panthers, which was one of the more embarrassing things I've ever seen in my entire life. And then they fired Dennis Allen this morning. So shout out to New Orleans. I love how they didn't even name Kubiak. Like after week 2, everybody anointed Kubiak the next great play caller in the NFL and the next offensive coordinator that teams are going to go over their skis to hire this offseason. And the Saints had the chance to make him their head coach, and they chose, I think it was like the special teams coordinator, to be the interim head coach. So that's how that went. Now, I saw a stat, or I heard a stat this morning on a podcast I listened to that was, it said, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was basically teams that won the yardage battle, the time of possession battle, and the turnover battle in the way that the Saints did in this one were like 255-0 in the history of the NFL until yesterday. This was the first time that, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was something to the degree of the yardage, the yardage that they outproduced them by, the turnover battle, plus the something else. Like no team has ever lost with that advantage, and the Panthers were the first one to beat the Saints for that. Alvin Kamara went over 200 yards from scrimmage in this one. Taysom Hill, this was someone that we highlighted in the waiver wire video last week, so hopefully some of you guys picked him up and put him into your tight end slot. With no Kendre Miller, with no Jamal Williams, with no Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave got absolutely killed in this one. He went to the hospital. Taysom Hill ended up, seeing 5 targets, getting 5 carries, ended up getting into the end zone. So he is like a really, really playable tight end, and dare I say flex play if Chris Olave is out for the foreseeable future as well. So what I've heard from Olave is like he's definitely going to be out for a week. I know a lot of people are saying like he's going to be out for sure for 4 weeks, maybe the rest of the season. I don't think that's a definite. He's got a lot of documented concussions. I don't think it's a definite that they put him on the IR. Very possible, obviously, but yeah, we'll just kind of have to see how that situation plays itself out. These players want to play at the end of the day, and if they're feeling healthy and if they feel like they can get back on and the medical team clears them to play, a lot of them don't want to just sit out for the sake of sitting out, So I think Olave probably falls into that category. On the flip side, Chuba was Chuba, 15 for 72 and 2 touchdowns. The big takeaways, I guess, Jatavian Sanders looks good, but like super unreliable. Jalen Coker, the breakout did not happen. 3 targets. Xavier Legette, 4 for 33 and a touchdown. Ends up getting into the end zone again. I want to say it's like his 3rd touchdown in the last 4 weeks. Also could have had a much bigger day. He ended up hurting his hand, missed some time, came back in, and then he had like a catch down the sideline that was like 30, 40 yards, which again would have made it a much bigger day from him. It was an insane play by the defensive back. Like Legette had it in his hands, and the defensive back like kind of like stripped it away and in unison like tucked it in and caught the ball as an interception. So like, I don't know. It was fucking crazy. I don't know that I blame anyone. I just think it was an insane play by the cornerback, but could have had a much bigger day. Adam Thielen, will have to see if he returns next week and or if he gets traded at the trade deadline tomorrow, which would just open up a lot more routes for Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette, and we'll check out the snap counts here to make sure that we're targeting them in the right order. Legette, yeah, 93% of the routes yesterday, despite missing time with a little bit of a hand injury. 25% of the targets. We're seeing that steadily increase week over week. 11%, 18%, 21%, 25%. Problem is, as long as Bryce Young's under center, though, it's so hard to rely on any of these fucking wide receivers, man, just because there's no upside. Every drive basically starts at 3rd and 10. So if they're not like manufactured touches, they're going to have really low floor games. Adam Thielen, again, has missed every game since week 3, so maybe he's back. Jalen Coker, surprisingly, did not run that many routes in this one. Only 59% of the routes, despite playing on 80% of them last week. So that's something to keep an eye on. Mingo, 31%. David Moore jumped up to 93%, so maybe David Moore is the actual wide receiver 2 behind Xavier Legette. That is something to note there for sure that I actually did not know until we looked at this page together. Again, you can go find this page on fantasylife.com if you are a member. That is their utilization score. Now, we are expecting Jonathan Brooks back for this week. Those have been the reports. They activated him the 21-day window, and basically how that works is you activate the player. He's got 21 days to be active for a game. So he can practice for 21 days, but he has to be active for the game within that window. If he does not get activated for the game, then he has to sit out for the remainder of the season. Again, reports say that Brooks will be active this week. I believe the Panthers play the Giants in Germany on Sunday morning. So it's an international game. Really good matchup for both sides, I guess. That would mean that he'll be playing his first game in Germany. Kind of wild initial game to be playing in. So should be activated. I'm really not expecting much for the first week, 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks. So like I'm probably fine playing Chuba Hubbard again as a locked-in RB2 for the time being. Obviously, we'll get a lot more information as soon as the game happens, but I feel good about him being like the one stable piece of this offense that they're going to rely upon until they feel comfortable with Jonathan Brooks. So I think it'll be pretty obvious. Like I don't think we're ever going to see a game where Brooks goes from, like this nothing right now to 15 touches or from like 3 carries to 15 the next game. I think we'll gradually start to understand like when we're seeing the swing of Hubbard down to Jonathan Brooks, and I don't think it's going to come that soon. I think what will happen is Jonathan Brooks will take a lot of the Miles Sanders touches and carries because this dude is literally a negative to this team every time he touches the ball. 2 carries for -5, 2 catches for -5. Like, literally, what are we doing? Ravens and Broncos. Now, realistically, Bo Nix looked pretty good in this one, to be honest with you. Despite the Ravens winning 41-10, the Ravens are just like on another planet right now in terms of the efficiency for their offense and their defense at this point. Actually, their defense is fine. It's not that great, but yeah, Baltimore playing like out of their fucking mind right now. Didn't Baltimore start 0-3? Did they start 0-3? That's not right, is it? Okay, they started 0-2, but still fucking insane. Yeah, they beat the shit out of the Broncos in this one, which wasn't really surprising. I know the spread of the game was like 9.5, and people thought that was like a trap, like it was way too many points. And then that's what happens when the Broncos play like the easiest schedule of the last month, and then they have to play the best team in the NFL. But Bo Nix looked relatively good. I think there were a few plays called back from holding penalties and some drop passes from their receivers that could have ended up having him with a much bigger fantasy day, but it didn't happen. Courtland Sutton continues to be really, really consistent. 7 for 122, 10 targets. He had that 0 game a couple weeks ago, and then he's been great ever since then. So in really good matchups, I think you trust Courtland Sutton as a really rock-solid wide receiver too. Now, the pecking order, Troy Franklin only went 1 for 19, but it felt like he had 8 targets in this one. A lot of them probably end up being the penalty throws. I want to see what the snap counts have been. Devon Vele, 49%. Troy Franklin, 49%. All right, so I'm curious to see if we see like the second half of the year breakout, which was the thumbnail for this, right? We're into week 9. So right now is when you start to see rookies get a lot more involved in offenses, when you see the younger players start to break through on the depth chart, when the teams know what they have in little Jordan Humphrey, and they know what they have in Marvin Mims, and they know what they have in Devon Vele, and you start to put on dudes like Troy Franklin, who, remember, Troy Franklin and Bo Nix went to college together. They have a really good set-in-stone chemistry already. So if we start to see Troy Franklin play a little bit more, I think he's someone worth keeping an eye on as it relates to snap counts and routes run. On the flip side, Lamar keeps doing MVP shit. Derrick Henry keeps doing Offensive Player of the Year shit. Zay Flowers keeps absolutely dominating right now. Where's he at in... He's got... No, that's not where I was going. He's got to be like a top 7 at worst fantasy wide receiver right now, right? After yesterday, I feel like every week he's putting up 27 points a game. Like Lamar keeps throwing up 303, and it feels like no other wide receiver is really that good in this offensive core. Zay Flow, number 10 right now. PPR's got to be up there. What is my computer doing? It's a fucking $5,000 computer moving like it's a $5 computer. How you down? Zay Flowers, wide receiver 8 right now. Okay, averaging about 15 PPR fantasy points per game. Zay is a set and forget it wide receiver 1 every week, despite Deontay Johnson coming over. See if we have any snap count data on Deontay for this week. Yeah, he ran 27% of the routes, didn't have a single target in this one. Rashad Bateman down to 82%, Nelson Aguilar 41%. And again, the game script got out of hand pretty quickly, so like that will probably take that into account. But look at these games, man. Zay Flowers, 33% of the targets, 36% of the targets, 36, 29, 27, 34. Like he looks so damn good this year. I don't think the emergence of Deontay Johnson is going to hurt Zay Flowers really whatsoever. It's obviously going to hurt Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, those guys. I think it just gives this offense another option and a much better like floor and ceiling combination. A guy who can separate on the other side of things. So I think that's just a great pickup by them for very low price, but I'm not really overly concerned about the impact it'll have on Zay. Philly and Jacksonville. Philly almost blew this game. They were up 22-0 at one point. Trevor Lawrence got in with 2 rushing scores, not good through the air. Travis Etienne woeded again. First game back, 3 carries for 24 yards. Tank Bigsby, unfortunately, this is kind of what happens when they get into this game script. He gets game scripted out, so nothing working for the backfields here. Nothing working in the receiver game either. Brian Thomas did play, but this was kind of the worry, him coming in super limited into this game. It was kind of a choice you had to make, like, do I believe he's good to go or not? Because it felt like he was super limited all week. He goes 2 for 22. The whole passing game kind of struggled, but nothing really to take away for it. If Evan Ingram's active, you're playing him. If Brian Thomas is active, you are playing him as well. Etienne's a dude I'll probably talk about tomorrow on the waiver wire show, whether or not I would drop him, but he's getting fucking close there. On the flip side, Saquon is unbelievable. The big news from this game, of course, is A.J. Brown. He's on my fucking fantasy team, so he gets hurt. He dies. Here's what I've heard for A.J. Brown. Apparently, the reports say that it's not serious. It's not supposed to be serious, but the only problem with it being not serious is like, let me see if we have any updated news so far on him. We have Daniel Jones will remain Giants starting quarterback. Aldrick Estime expected to see an increased workload moving forward. Sure. Drake London believed to have suffered a hip pointer, not considered a long-term issue. Yeah, we already knew that. A.J. Brown, knee, avoided serious injury. Yeah, I mean, like, he avoided serious injury. The only fucking problem is he's missed 4 games already. Now they play 2 divisional opponents in the next 10 days, I want to say. They play Dallas next week on Sunday and then Washington on Thursday. So we need him back. It is apparently maybe like a minor sprain, but you could still miss time with a sprain. Like DK Metcalf is dealing with a MCL sprain right now, I believe, and that's cost him multiple weeks already. So it's possible A.J. Brown suits up next week, but like with the way that I've been like traumatically impacted by fucking wide receiver injuries this year alone, between A.J. Brown and T. Higgins and Cooper Kupp and Josh Downs and Jordan Addison, all these dudes, like I'm not optimistic whatsoever that he plays this upcoming week. Dallas Goedert, I don't think has returned to practice at all yet, so he's probably a long shot, but Devontae Smith is obviously a very, very high-end wide receiver too if A.J. Brown misses time. Saquon should probably see more targets, but those are the only guys that you really want to be playing on this offense along with Jalen Hurts, of course. Great matchups against Dallas and Washington over the next couple of weeks. Chicago, Arizona. Chicago offense is just so fucking broken, man. You can't really trust anybody. Obviously, you continue to start DeAndre Swift because he gets so many touches, another 22 in this one and 6 catches. But, like, if they don't have the absolute, like, silver spoon-fed matchup, they just can't get anything going on offense. It's really, really bad out in Chicago. Like, it was cute when they were putting up points against the Rams, who were banged up, the Panthers, the Jaguars. But, like, even these last 2, Washington and Arizona, who are supposed to be great matchups, like, it's just broken out there in Chicago. On the flip side, the passing game still is really funky in Arizona. Um, Hard to trust that side as well, but the run game is fantastic. James Conner, 18 for 107. Amari DeMarcado breaks away that draw at the end of the first half for a 53-yard touchdown. Trey Benson even getting involved, 8 for 37 and a touchdown. Again, this is the time of the year where we should be picking up a guy like Trey Benson. James Conner is getting so much work. He got banged up a little bit in this game, ended up coming back in, so he's fine from that. But again, like you start to look at, all right, if this workhorse gets banged up, who becomes the number one waiver wire pickup of the week? And you should be a week early on that. And that's where a guy like Trey Benson needs to be owned. Where, yeah, he'll split carries probably with Amari DeMarcado, split work, but you still want the talented, highly athletic, high upside dude in this backfield that's ridiculously efficient, right? 213 yards on the ground. Those are the types of guys that you want to stash on the bench right now. Lions and the Packers, this game was an interesting game because the rain was coming down. The weather was a huge impact on this game. You saw it in the game plan immediately. David Montgomery played like the entire first quarter. I want to say they gave him like 8 touches on the very first drive. Gibbs actually did not see the field until the second quarter. Didn't matter. He ended up getting home 11 for 65 and a touchdown. Jared Goff, another game where he completed like every pass, but only needed to throw the ball 22 times. So they are a team that is just clicking on all cylinders. Their offense, they could do it. It doesn't matter what the weather is. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. It doesn't matter what their strengths are because Detroit is strong everywhere. They need to pass the ball a lot, they'll do that. They need to run the ball a lot, they'll do that. They need to hold the ball for a long time, they'll do that. If they need to take shots downfield, they'll do that because they'll be getting Jameson Williams back next week. So they are an immovable object and an unstoppable force right now. I took them to win the Super Bowl on DraftKings, I want to say in August. I put out a bold predictions video. I remember just predicting what would happen throughout the NFL season a couple days before the season started, and they were my Super Bowl predictions. So I took them, honestly, doesn't even look that great because it was only 12-1 before the season started, but they're up to 5-1 now. So we did get some good value there, and I'm feeling really good about that pick. I took a bunch of, I think, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, most receptions on the year tickets as well that have not, they're just sitting there right now waiting for the season to obviously progress. But if you ever wanted to see what picks I took, as well as like what underdog slips I make and what bets I take on the regular, you could do that by downloading the Pickett app. It's free to download. It's free to follow me on there. Pickett. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, it's like a social betting app where you could see my entire calendar. You could see all of the picks that I make for like Monday night tonight. Like obviously, if you sign up on Underdog with our code BDGE, you'll get the free square for Patrick Mahomes. All he needs to do is get 1 yard. You're a winner on it. But you could see what I pair with Patrick Mahomes for the game tonight. And if you want to tail that, there's a feature on Pickett that literally says like copy this bet and it'll open up your sports book. So get on there, use code BDGE when you get on there. Again, it's free. They just want to know where you came from. Sorry, the sun is hitting my fucking eyes right now. I feel like we're on one of those fields where it's like 4 o'clock, the witching hour, and the sun's cutting off half of them. And the guy's going to drop passes. I'm about to like skip games right now because I can't see shit out here. It's like a flu game for me right now. But yeah, go follow me on Pickett. On the flip side, Jordan Love clearly not 100%. The groin was groining. Jaden Reed had a big game, and we talked a lot about that in the Sit Start show, where Jaden Reed was in line to just kind of eat up this defense because they allow insane games to slot wide receivers, dating back to like week 1. So he was in a smash spot, ended up smashing 5 for 113. Josh Jacobs started off on fire, but the game script got so far away from them into the second half that he was not really on the field. He came off kind of limping at one point, ended up coming back onto the field. But yeah, they just didn't really need him because he's not the pass catching back on long down and distance and catch up mode type plays. Other than that, yeah, you're starting Jacobs, you're starting Reed, you're starting Kraft. Other than that, you can't really trust anybody else in this lineup. Definitely still holding on to Romeo Doubs. I'm probably holding on to Christian Watson as well because in better weather days, like there were plays that just fell out of the receiver's hands because of I don't know, don't do that. I think my camera overheated from the fucking sun. That's insane. Yeah, there were plays that were just not made because they were slipping and sliding, and it just would like slide off the receiver's fingers. So That being said, again, I would hold on to the Packers receivers through their bye. They have a bye next week, unfortunately. Rams Seahawks. This is a good-ass game. Overtime. Walk-off catch by Demarcus Robinson. Like I said last week, he's literally Jerry Rice when he has to be the wide receiver 3, and he is literally Hunter Long when he has to be the wide receiver 1. It's bad out here. But Cooper Kupp, I will say, looked about 100 times healthier in this game. Didn't hurt that Puka Nacua got ejected earlier on for throwing a punch. Might have helped him because now he gets another week of rest. And he was limited all week with a re-aggravation of the knee injury. He was not really used or targeted early on whatsoever. All right, we'll just get the upskirt angle for the rest of the video. But yeah, this offense is fucking awesome when both guys are on the field. So Cooper Kupp 11 for 104. Again, the 10 days rest coming off of last Thursday Night Football. He looks a million times healthier. So if you held on to him throughout and you can use him as your wide receiver, 1, 2, 3, whatever, you're feeling really fucking good about that. Kyron with another 23 touches. Again, Blake Corum needs to be owned right now, though. If you're a Kyron owner, D-Rob, yeah, I guess you could play him. I mean, he's been going fucking nuts. He's got 4 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, I believe. But the floor game is coming soon. But it's if they're playing in good matchups where the over-under is going to be high and the teams are scoring 46, 48, 50 points, you can do worse than DeMarcus Robinson. On the flip side, Geno throws for a shitload of yards, gets sacked a ton. This offensive line, man, is just atrocious back there, just killing Geno. Kenneth Walker, I feel like he hasn't scored a touchdown in weeks, but he's getting a ton of work, obviously. 25 carries, 83 yards, 3 catches, 24 yards. So gets it done, relatively speaking, for fantasy if you're in a PPR league. But the big takeaway here is obviously Jackson Smith and Jigba looked fucking phenomenal. This kind of feels like the first time he's actually looked good on an NFL field, which is wild to say. But 13 targets on 34 pass attempts for Geno Smith. That is a huge target share. 7 for 180 and 2 touchdowns. So you're talking about a 36, 37, 38-point PPR day. Obviously, a week winner type of performance. Maybe you guys started him up to this point. I don't know how startable he's really been. There were some bye weeks. There's a lot of injuries. So probably a lot of you guys forced to start him. Question becomes, how sticky is his performance when DK Metcalf returns? Because when DK is on the field, obviously he becomes the priority here. He becomes the main target. He becomes the one in this offense. So I don't want to get too crazy on JSN right now, but obviously gives you a little bit more confidence. It was just nice to see. It was nice to see him do something. Like the catches he was making was very Ohio State-esque. It looked like he was back under control, where it's like he very rarely showed spectacular play, big playability, the body control that we saw in college throughout the NFL so far. But yesterday felt like that fucking finally came to fruition. And the last game of the evening, Vikings-Colts. This game was atrocious until the second half, where Darnold threw 3 touchdowns in the second half. Not much to take away here, but it is very clear, obviously, that Ty Chandler is not the 2 here. Cam Akers seems to be the backup to Ty Chandler now. Justin Jefferson gets it done again, 7 for 137. We had Hawkinson finally make an appearance, only 3 for 27, so not a big appearance. Jordan Addison does get home, but he's still more of like a shaky flex play because, they're just splitting targets with so many people that are not named Justin Jefferson right now, so it's hard to rely on him. On the flip side, we got A-Rich, who was benched, and then Joe Flacco did his best A-Rich impression there, unfortunately. So again, I get it's a cute storyline, Flacco, but in games where they're not, again, having a great matchup, it gets really, really difficult to trust him for fantasy. And the matchups going forward, you got the Bills, which I don't hate, because if they play the Colts the same way that they played Miami, right? I just talked about how the Bills play like this really intense cover 2, like deep. We're not going to let you beat us deep. And maybe that was just their game plan for Miami, because you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, which lends itself to a lot of over-the-middle dump-offs. Like that could be a huge Josh Downs game. That could be a huge JT game. That could be a huge, slot wide receiver game. Looks good. Then you get the Jets, the Lions, the Pats, the Broncos, Titans, Giants. So, like, you have a mix of good matchups, bad matchups. But, like, in the bad matchups, I am not excited to start Joe Flacco. And the passing game, I mean, they only threw for 179 yards, only completed 16 passes. But the good news to take away here is 9 targets for Josh Downs. So you're talking about 6 catches, which is a huge percentage of the catches. So the play in theory was correct. But again, the concern was that the team would get to Joe Flacco so quickly, just confuse him with coverages. And I think we saw that. If anyone watched the game, you saw how like quickly Flacco was trying to get the ball out because he wasn't really sure, even being such a veteran, like the blitzes that were coming his way. Now, the one like underlying note here that I will say that's really positive for Jonathan Taylor, it was a bad game, obviously, but Joe Flacco, as opposed to A-Rich, Joe Flacco is a check down fucking merchant. And if Jonathan Taylor is not playing on passing downs, that's fine because he throws to running backs on first and second downs really often. Like you saw him 5 targets, which was second on the team only behind Josh Downs. So even if he's not running all of the routes in long down and distance situations, even though he ran a lot of routes, 57% of the routes, long down and distance, he was at 44%. Trey Sermon was at 56%. He's still going to catch a ton of passes from Flacco because that is Flacco's game. He's like, let me get it out quick. Let me try not to make mistakes. Let me just get it to the open man. I'm not trying to be a hero. He's like the opposite of Anthony Richardson pretty much. So I think that's kind of an underlying good thing for Jonathan Taylor owners. I think he got banged up a little bit, but came back into the game. So I'm not overly concerned, but keep an eye on practice reports when it comes to Jonathan Taylor. I can't believe this fucking overheated from the goddamn sun from the window. And I think that is all we have for the Week 9 recap. So again, if you're not subscribed, we will be doing our waiver wire video tomorrow, every single Tuesday, obviously. We do these recaps every single Monday around noon, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So turn the notifications on for the channel for that if you want to grab it. And if you want to grab this is literally free money right here. We have Patrick Mahomes getting 1 single yard tonight on Monday Night Football on Underdog Fantasy. So go sign up with our code BDGE, and this will magically appear on your app. If you want to see what picks I take along with this, go follow me on Pickit and use code BDGE when you sign up. Absolutely free on that app, on that platform. I love y'all, and I will see you tomorrow. Smoochies.